Hey everyone, how's it going? Hope you're all doing great, as I always say. And in this video, I got some stories for you, like usual, but this is Christmas. These aren't Christmas stories, but that would have been cool. That would have been a much better idea than what I had. Anyways, if you want to hear some stories, then you can pull up a stump with me and let's jump into it. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. So this happened back in 2019. I had found this drain tunnel that was near my friend's house. I tried to explore it, but I only got in maybe 100 feet before it turned to just pitch darkness. So I go to my friend's house. I say, "Hey bro, you want to come and explore this cool drain tube with me?" Now he tells me that he's kind of scared of that type of thing, but he tells me that I can have his headlamp though. So I oblige, and I take it, and I thank him, and I return to the tunnel. The sun is starting to go down outside, so I head inside, and I have the lamp on. I'm just observing my surroundings. The deeper into the tunnel, the older the graffiti gets on the walls. I'm at the point where it seems to be mostly from the 70s, and having to do with weed and sex and all that stuff, and somebody's name had sex with blank at wherever. I kinda laughed to myself at the thought of older people from back then just kinda getting high and having sex in the drain tube. I try to ignore the fact though and compose myself, and I keep going. I walk for maybe 10 more minutes, and then I start to realize just how long this tunnel is. I notice that the walls have been barren for the last 3 minutes. And then I keep walking, and more graffiti comes into view, but this time, it's not the same. It's occult symbols, and all kinds of weird glyphs and everything. In the moment, I figured it was just some edgy kids 30, 40 years ago, maybe to scare people off from their hideout, so I don't think too much of it. And for a total of 30 minutes I've been walking now. I should probably head back. So I walk back, and there's a wall. The wall is blocking what would have been the entrance and exit. It's made of concrete, and looks like it's been there for decades. There's no possible way that I've made a wrong turn. It's just one long tube. I feel like I'm trapped in this tunnel. I have to head back down to find a way out. I think, oh great. So I turn around and I start walking. I walk until I see the occult symbols again, and then I hear something behind me. I hear what sounds like multiple legs splashing around, and I can clearly hear light breathing coming from whatever this is. I take pictures because I have my phone out trying to get service. It blinks after I take the picture and kind of lurches forward. I do a 180 and I make tracks. I sprint for a good 10 minutes. My muscles are giving out, my lungs are burning, and my throat is dry as the Sahara. Eventually, I do find the outlet, and I think, thank God. I escape the tunnel, and I collapse into a puddle of stagnant water and tadpoles. I walk to my friend's house, cold, wet, and tired, and I never go back. And the picture that's included here is really different, so I'll let you decide what you think it is. But if I had to hazard a small guess, on the left it looks like there's a thing standing there, but I couldn't tell you what it is, so I'll leave it up to you guys. What do you think's in that picture? People keep making fun of the Bunyip, but I'm not so sure. So this happened when I was in the Air Force. We were based next to a swamp in a bushland in New South Wales. It was 2 weeks of digging trenches and security to defend the air base, quotes. 1.5 weeks into the exercise, I was on a piquet at 2:30 a.m., being annoyed at the mosquitoes. And then I started hearing noises, just outside the field of observation. Me and the other officer in training are like, oh, it must be Op 4. We were being played by training staff. We activate our Gen 4 NVG scopes, no sight. We wake and consult the section lead, who agrees that the two of us need to investigate. We get excited to be super army men. We follow the noise source using our best commando skills, thinking that we're all hot shit and everything. The noise is arising behind a berm in our area. We keep low, and we move to the ridge top to investigate activity on the other side. It's just a swamp. There's not much going on. We start to feel disappointed that something more isn't going on. But then the sound gets louder. Then this weird smell fills the air. It's like wet dog, but a million times worse. The splashing can be heard on our right. I forgot to mention that it was a new moon, so the NVGs are shit tier in relation. We spot a shape, roughly 2 meters in height, on the water's edge. It looks like somebody is stooped over. I signal to the other guy that it's probably a sergeant. He must be washing something, I guess. I retreat down the berm to whisper a course of action. Is this part of the exercise? Are we supposed to demand ID? I move back to the top of the ridge to OP. The shape has shifted to waist-deep water. It looks like it's looking straight down into the water. I'm just thinking, what the hell is this guy doing? We need to make sure this bloke is okay. I call out, "You there, what's the magic number?" It was 11 that night. The shape turns. There's no other movement or noise, not even in the water. I just think, what am I looking at through my NVGs? It's just a human shape, but there's no discernible features. The outline looks like it's covered in matted fur or feathers. The shape just grunts at us. Then I start to get a little nervous, and then someone grabs my mouth. I get rolled over. It's a corporal who silently drags me down the berm while a sergeant does the same to my mate. We get put into a UTE and we're driven to HQ. We get set in some dim light and we're questioned. What did you see? What did you hear? Did we make contact? My friend and I are just shitting ourselves. We say that there was no reportable contact made. They say, "Are you sure?" We say, "Yes, sir. This is a weird exercise if this is one." Told we are to sit tight. We sit in the shed just all night long. A senior officer comes in the morning and asks the same questions. We're sat in a room some more. Me and my mate are too tired and unsure and nervous to talk to each other. An intelligence officer comes in. He asks the same questions. He asks if we are happy to continue with the exercise. I don't want to let the team down, so we both agree. We're told, though, not to discuss this night or what we saw ever again. When we ask what it was, we're given some kind of non-answer. Oh, it's just somebody that's been diagnosed with mental stress. And we say, okay, fair enough, knowing that that's not true at all. The whole section is redeployed about 15 kilometers from our original point, and we rejoin them. Everyone acts as if nothing happened. On the exercise debrief, my friend and I are taken aside and told not to reveal any classified medical details. I'll never forget that shape, the smell, or the way it moved, or anything, and how all the directing staff acted super paranoid. So at the time that this happened, I would say that I was just a kid. We were living in a tiny town, not far from the Canadian border, so one summer, I decided that I'm going to be a ninja. For a little bit, and I truly believed this, that I was 100% ninja. I had black water shoes, camo pants, and a top. I had my face and head covered in a camo shirt that I wrapped around myself to look cool. so my clothes are muddy and the day is long too. I used to leave them outside in a trash bag in my fort, with dirt and leaves in the bag. This is a trick that I learned from my dad who hunts, and it makes it so that your clothes don't smell like laundry soap or deodorant or whatever. And if you only take hot water showers with no soap the night before you hunt, then rock camo and stuff like the clothes I had, you're essentially invisible to animals, as long as you're quiet. And remember, I'm a ninja, so I'm quiet, and I am the night. So I was running around with my blowgun, hunting bugs and scaring birds and watching animals and stuff in the woods behind my house, like every other day. I decided to suit up in my fort and change into my ninja gear and bounce around playing pretend. So I'm running around as a ninja, mainly down this old road that's near my house. It's toward a creek that I know and love dearly, even now. It wasn't far from my home, really, maybe 3 miles or so, the creek maybe being 4 miles. Suddenly, I realized something. I'm looking at something big and brown and furry in front of me. I register it, but I don't flinch as I'm a dumb kid. It's sitting facing away from me on the old road. It's doing something. I just keep walking and bouncing toward it. As I get closer, I realize that this thing must be 6 feet tall, or almost, sitting down. Slowly, I realize I should stop running toward it. I'm about 30 feet from it at this point. As I told you, I was a dumb kid. I realized that this thing could be dangerous, and then it looked over its shoulder at me. Its body was broad as all get out, like 3 or 4 feet across. It was medium dark brown, and its face was totally obscured by fur, except for its eyes, that were dark and black and beady. There were no whites. It just looked at me over its shoulder while turning, and we made eye contact, and I took off running the way I came, like a madman. I was running at full tilt, like my very life depended on it. I was seriously nearly blacking out, trying not to break my sprint. I honestly felt like this was it, and I remember trying to make real decisions for the first time in my life, like, should I stay on the road? Should I cut through the trees or bushes? Should I climb a tree and hope it doesn't come after me? I decided to continue running full throttle down the road, risking a blackout. I make it home alive and lock all the doors. I'm suddenly feeling vulnerable in my stupid house with all of our sliding glass doors and stuff. There's no sign that it followed me. Remember, I'm a ninja. I barely recover my breath, and I have to lay down for some time to not drop dead right there. I seriously run my lungs off. That night, there are sounds outside, and I am under the covers like a kid would be. My dad says that it was probably a bear, and the next morning he tells me not to go far from the house for a few days until it leaves. The next day, I don't even go outside. When Dad leaves for work, I close all the windows and the shades. That day, I see a figure through the dining room shades that looks big AF. It's sitting like a bear, but I know it's not. I sneak my ass into the laundry room, silent, and I just sit there, trying not to make noise. That night, more noises outside, and this time, they're enough to wake my dad. He gets out of bed, grabs a shotgun, and flicks the lights on and off on the back porch, yelling for the bear to go away. He's done this before. The bears typically leave. The next day, I repeat the same ritual. All the windows are closed and the shades are drawn. I watch TV and play video games. I'm really hoping that thing doesn't try to get in. But this time it's a little different. I see the figures in the windows again. I'm pretty sure it's the same one, but it's like it's fast. I figure it's time to employ my dad as my watchful protector, when he gets home. As soon as he gets home, I spill the beans entirely. I tell Dad that I think I pissed off a monster and let it home. He's not fazed, but he's mad at me. Dad decides to take out all the trash and move the cans away from the house. He mows the lawn too, way out, so if anything comes out of the woods, we can see it coming. Then he turns the automatic lights on that came with our house. We turned them off when we moved in, since they would always go on and off during the night and wake us all up. Most of the time it was just a dog or a raccoon. 1% of the time it was quite literally nothing. Dad then calls animal control and tells them that there's a bear that's been on the property and he'll shoot it if he has to. They get mad, so he tells them to come and get it then, but they say they can't, they don't have the resources. After all of this, Dad says that ought to do it, like he solved it, and I trust him. That night, the lights go on and we hear the noises. Dad opens the back door and does the same, yell at the bear again, but we can't see anything. I now have the courage, since Dad is there, so I look out my windows, and at this point, I don't see anything. The lights go off. After a while, it happens again. Dad does the same thing. Nothing to see. This repeats all that night until Dad just says, well, it's just a bear, it'll leave eventually. But I can't sleep. I'm staring out the windows. I see something big, coming from the trees far out. It moves very quickly and unnaturally, like it doesn't have to build up speed to move or stop. It can just move rapidly and reverse course on a dime too. It looks like it's the size of a car, like if you were to stand it up, and it has these long spindly legs. I watch as this thing moves around the yard, way off, and then close to the house, and then way off again. I'm too scared to move. Eventually, it does leave. The next day I go looking for footprints, but I don't find any, quote, footprints. I find these massive imprints in the yard through the window, and I check it out. It looks like something big was standing and looking in all of our windows, trying to almost check us all out, and it was on 2 feet. And like I said, there were no footprints, just these weird imprints in the ground. My window has several deep indents in front of it. I stayed inside for the rest of the summer. After that, I canceled the whole ninja thing. It came back a few times in the next weeks, but then eventually it must have got bored and left for good. So this one is a viewer submission that was sent to me back in March, and it seems that I completely forgot to actually record it and get it on the channel. So, here's that story. This was submitted by A from Australia. I was born and lived in Romania until my late 20s when I moved to Australia. When I was a kid, I used to spend a lot of weekends and school holidays at my grandparents' house in a little mountain village in Transylvania, a few kilometers from Bran Castle, more widely known as Dracula's Castle. And sorry to disappoint so early in my story, but it's not vampire related, as some would expect to hear from that part of the world. However, after listening to this recount, you might ask yourselves the same questions that I do. I'm a city boy, but I always loved the picturesque mountains that surround my grandparents' small village. During summer, I would spend weeks there, riding my mountain bike on dirt roads, hiking to nearby tourist spots, or reading whatever books I could get my hands on at the time. There was no internet there back in the day, no mobile phones, no GPS or fancy technology of the sorts. A completely different era. The summer before starting high school, my best friend and I were both 14. I went to my grandparents to spend a couple of weeks bike riding, hiking, making the most out of the late summer weather. Two foolishly daring kids, oblivious to taking risks, especially when we were doing stuff together. After about a week of riding the trails in and around the village, we decided to ramp it up a notch and go for a longer ride halfway to the nearby mountain peak, where we knew a little tourist spot. There was a lookout there, a small cafe and souvenir shop, and a car park where vendors would gather around tourist buses to sell trinkets and some fresh forest fruit. We were kinda hoping to meet and befriend some cute girls our age, as such creatures were scarce in the village. With the plan ready, we got up early that morning and packed some spare clothes, snacks, and water, and decided to follow a less circulated track unmarked on our old tourist map. We hadn't been on that path before, but an old neighbor who used to be a shepherd said that it was less steep than the marked tourist hiking trails, so it was easier to go uphill on a bike, we assumed. Also, there were hardly any houses on the way. This was good news for us, as the people in the village kept guard dogs, which often gave chase to us when we rode past on our bikes. I kissed my grandma goodbye and told her that we would be gone for most of the day. It was pretty sunny outside, with only a few fluffy clouds, so we didn't mind the weather. For the first couple of hours, we kept going uphill at a steady pace. The village remained well behind as we were approaching a thick pine forest. The track became much more difficult than anticipated, with lots of uneven, loose rocks and overgrown vegetation. We didn't realize that it was mainly used by sheep herds to go up the mountain in the spring and back in the autumn, but the path was wide enough to ride side by side, so we kept going. After approximately 2 hours of riding, with only short breaks for water, we came across a forest. Our path was going right through it, and we both felt a little nervous. Before venturing forward, we stopped to have a quick snack and rest a little. We had left home early and made relatively good time to that point. We needed our energy back before the next uphill stage in our ride. It wasn't uncommon for hikers in that region to come face to face with brown bears, some of which were huge, almost as big as North American grizzlies. Attacks were few, but encountering a bear was honestly my biggest fear. Bears chasing me had been a recurring nightmare that I've had growing up. I didn't want to look like a coward in front of my friends, however, so we got back on the bikes. As we were approaching the trees, we noticed a thin smoke rising over them. Hidden behind the first row of trees, we noticed a small timber cabin, covered with weathered wood shingles. It looked very old, run down, and we would have presumed it to be deserted if not for the smoke coming out of the chimney. The windows were small, dirty, and cracked. Adjoining the cabin was a derelict-looking tin shed, barely standing, leaning over the side of the cabin. The courtyard surrounding them was muddy, with some rusty buckets scattered around. The thing I noticed, and still remembered quite vividly, was a large, darkened wood chopping block near the shed, with rusty chains that were nailed to it. It wasn't something out of the ordinary to see in rural Romania, where people would often sacrifice animals for food. But I guess those chains just gave me the heebie-jeebies. I was riding in front and slowed down a bit to wait for my friend. I made a childish joke, something like, "Hurry up, Theo, or the bad witch will fly out of the chimney and grab the last rider and toss him into her stew." I said this loudly so he could hear. 2 seconds later, the front door creaked open and a strange old man busted out, shouting at us with a guttural, broken voice. We got startled, but slowed down a bit to say "G'day," as thought it was always the polite thing to do in our village. The old man then grabbed the wooden stick from near the door and started waving it, walking wobbly towards us, while continuing to yell something that we couldn't understand. He looked menacing, however, and frankly, quite disgusting, with oily hair and ripped clothes, large yellow teeth, bulging eyes, and the veins on his face pumping. The man was short, but stocky, and we weren't going to wait around for him to make sense. We got pedaling right away, continuing our way on the rocky path deeper into the forest. We soon lost sight of the house and the old man. As we went around a bend, Theo and I were trying to laugh and joke about this weird encounter, but the truth is we were both shaken and knackered at that point. As soon as we cleared the forest, we had to stop and have a rest, drink water and eat something. Our determination from early morning had completely washed off by that point. I felt pretty helpless and scared, realizing how much we underestimated our capacity to roam through the woods on our average quality mountain bikes. My legs were cramping. Theo could barely breathe and was frustrated with his bike, which was having issues changing gears. Moreover, the front tire was slowly leaking air. The trip was not going well, and we didn't find it enjoyable anymore, so we were weighing our options. Continue uphill for another couple hours or so toward the tourist spot, and then return to the village on the regular hiking trail, going downhill. Or accept the defeat, abandon our goal and go back the same way we came, back through the forest, past the creepy cabin, and follow the shitty path back home. The idea of giving up and going back did not sit well at all with our young male hormones, but there was one factor that got the city boys by surprise and ultimately made the decision for us: the weather. Although it was fine in the morning, by the time we cleared the forest and got to the western side of the mountain, thick gray clouds had been gathering. As we were finishing our snack, it decided to drizzle. We could now see the top of the mountain covered in a dense fog, which was slowly lowering toward us. So this was it. Without much enthusiasm, Theo and I made the rational decision to head back immediately, hoping to avoid a complete drenching on our way home. We put our plastic raincoats on, Theo pumped some air in his front tire, and we hopped on the bikes, heading back into the forest. 5 minutes into the ride back, the drizzle turned into proper rain, making some portions of the track muddy and slippery. A thin fog slowly engulfed the woods. Visibility was still okay, but the scenery became very eerie and gray. Theo and I were both silent, trying to keep our focus on the track ahead. I remember feeling really anxious and suddenly overwhelmed by what I could only describe as a desperation to get out of the forest immediately. I was too scared to pedal any faster, as the bike was already skidding and slipping down the muddy tracks. I still very well remember the silhouette of that cabin coming into view. Needless to say, I found it 100 times creepier, with the rainfall and gray mist surrounding it. Approaching the house, I was feeling my heart beating out of my chest, so I decided to counteract by acting brave, i.e., a jerk. I started ringing my bell loudly, shouting, "Hey Pops, hey Creepo," plus some expletives a kid my age should not have used. Theo joined me, with even more enthusiasm. These were some very poor decisions. As we were going past the house, I again noticed the chopping block. It was all covered in blood, with a blood-soaked knife and axe on top of it. At the base were 2 buckets. One had a goat's head, tongue out, the other full of blood and entrails. There was something like steam rising from the second bucket. Presumably, the kill was fresh and the organs still warm when tossed in there. I was still processing what I was seeing when suddenly we heard shouting. It sounded like the crazy old man again, but we couldn't see him now. I was disoriented and slowed down. Then I saw him walking backwards from behind his shed, shouting with his arms wide like he was trying to block someone's way toward us. What happened next is a bit blurry, but I think I heard him say the words, "No, no, let them pass. I will give you meat. You have goat." He was perhaps 10 to 15 meters away when I saw him being pushed aside by someone, a person who was coming directly for us. As he fell on his ass, the old man turned and screamed, "Run!" toward us. It was too late though. This man was coming at us, and he was scary. He was short and stocky, somewhat a similar build as the old man, but completely naked. His skin was gray and very, very cracked. Deep cracks were all over his body, like he had some massive scabs or a thick layer of dry mud covering him. I only caught a glimpse of his face, and then he let out a scream that sounded like a loud wheeze and ran towards me. The eyes were recessed deep into their sockets and seemed cloudy yellow. His lips were missing. I found this to be the most disturbing. That ghoul face still haunts me. The area around his mouth looked like the skin had been peeled off, exposing massive-looking teeth and black gums. This man's face was gray as the rest of the body. The only other thing I can remember are some rare flocks of long, dark hair over his eyes and one to the side. The best overall description I could give you about this encounter: imagine a guy with some kind of flesh-eating bacteria disease around his mouth, who also fell in thick mud, which later then dried up and cracked, remaining attached to his body. Not quite like a zombie like you'd see in movies, but not far off either. I'm calling this man or creature a ghoul. It seems the most appropriate term to my understanding. I felt my blood freeze, seeing this thing coming toward me. I vaguely remember trying to control my legs and pedal faster, but they were just frozen. I couldn't even feel them. My mouth became instantly dry. The wheezing noise coming from this creature was horrendous, and to this day, when I hear someone wheezing, I get creeped out. Although still in motion on the bike, I felt just like a sitting duck, waiting for this ghoul to take a few more steps in front of my bike and grab me. My luck was the creature suddenly noticed Theo coming from behind me, and this disoriented him for a couple seconds, enough for us to squeeze past. That moment, I think my adrenaline started pumping. I regained control of my body and was able to ride the bike away from there as fast as I could without looking back. It was a very close call. We could still hear the old man shouting, fading back for another minute or two. I can't remember much else from our way home. We were both in pretty bad shape when my grandparents saw us. We told them the whole story. They seemed to believe us. For the next few days, I was trying to extract more info from them and our neighbors about the old man and the ghoul that we encountered. Everyone we brought this up to acted very evasive, saying the old man is weird and has issues, and that's the best we don't go near him again, which we didn't plan on anyways. Nobody said anything about the ghoul, other than perhaps another person lives with him who likes to walk around naked. From my discussions with Theo, he told me that he saw exposed bone in one of the legs of the ghoul and was ready to swear that to be true. Theo also mentioned bloodstains on his thighs. I don't know about either of these, as much as I had tried to remember more details. However, before I wrap this up, here comes the creepy end. Our further digging, years later, indicates the old man was the son of a soldier who died in mysterious circumstances not long after World War II was over. This man was said to have been a truly deranged person who allegedly worked as an extermination camp guard during the war. While Romania was one of Germany's allies, in 1944 they switched sides. He is said to have been cursed by a gypsy woman, a witch, who was imprisoned and later died in his camp. Upon his return from the war, the soldier fathered a son with the woman who was not all there from the village. She was later found dead in the woods, presumably killed and eaten by bears. The man was also on a downhill path, drinking lots and causing problems with the law. He hanged himself a few years later and was supposedly buried outside of the church cemetery. Rumor has it, a couple of grave robbers tried digging him out to steal valuables buried with the corpse, like gold teeth, but the wood casket was empty. This is all hearsay, and record keeping was never a strong point of post-war Romania, so not very optimistic about finding more info about these people. I was told the cabin burned down, but honestly, I never went back to check for myself. My theory is that the World War II soldier was cursed, spiraled down into insanity, tried to off himself but somehow remained alive or undead, and his son, maybe the old man, staged his burial to keep him out of sight for years after. What do you think, considering all of the missing pieces of the puzzle? So, thank you to A from Australia for sending that in. It's an absolutely wild encounter. So, what'd you think of those stories? Let me know which one was your favorite one down in the comments. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, then consider liking and subscribing. In the description I have a PayPal and a Patreon if that's something that you want to do as well. And, with that, I wish you all a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, or Happy Hanukkah, or Happy Yule, or Kwanzaa, whatever you celebrate, just have a good time. And thank you all for pulling up a stump, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you all for watching.